Okay, so moving on, I'm just going to skip over 2, 3, 4, sadly, because we're going to look at in this a whole system of government, a sort of a decentralized legal system. There's a loose confederation of states amongst the Greeks, and Odysseus is the, the overlord, the king, the prince of Ithaca. And in that, as I say, in his area of authority, he's not just the king, he's the judge. And so if you remove the judge from the kingdom, then the law will not be upheld. And injustice will ensue, and the injustice is represented by the suitors. And the suitors represent debauchery. They give way to the passions of their lives. All they are interested in is eating and drinking and carousing. They represent bad men. And in Homer's world, good men know how to regulate their passions, to control their bodily urges, including their appetites, their food, and so forth. They're not living simply for worldly pleasures. And Odysseus is the example of this. So we have bad men and injustice back in Ithaca, books 1 to 4, portrayed. This is a place of anarchy and disorder, and it's because of Poseidon, the earth shaker. He shook injustice. He shook justice up to the point where there's only injustice in Odysseus' home lion. And Athena says, that cannot be, Zeus. You represent justice. Fix this problem. And then he goes about doing exactly that. She gets sent down, and what we see then is all sorts of interactions here. Let me mention one final figure because she's too important for me to overlook, and that is the figure of Penelope, because Penelope is a virtuous woman. She is so virtuous that she has managed to hold the appetites of the suitors at bay for years, because they're so hungry for what she had that they wanted it all. And chiefly one of them wanted to marry her. Said, okay, Odysseus is gone, and we want everything. We don't just want the serving women and the food and the wine. We want to run this place, and we'll get that by marrying you. And she has dissembled and put them off through deceit. She's woven a web. And the web is a shroud which she's been weaving for her father-in-law, because he's near death. Odysseus' father is near death. And as a virtuous woman, she wants her husband's father to be treated honorably, and so she's weaving this shroud that will go over his burial site, over his tomb, and they're waiting. And she says, when I finish that, I'll marry one of you. And by day she weaves it, and she's at her loom and busy weaving it, and then at night she unweaves it. And that's been going on 3 years. Now, you may say, how have they not figured this out? And the answer is, well, it's a fictional account, but I guess it's a lot of drinking and eating and carousing, and they're happy and drunk and whatever. But that's what's been going on, and finally she's going to get caught. And they said, okay, we've caught you. Finally, we know you've been up to. But note that she is acting in the fashion of wisdom. She's deceiving for a virtuous purpose. And the virtuous purpose is to be loyal to her husband and to hold his honorable household and not marry one of these scoundrels who just happens to be there and is going to take her by force. She doesn't want to marry one of them. She wants to marry a wise man, a virtuous man. She doesn't want to marry one of these awful men who hasn't even gone off to war. She wants a hero. She doesn't want one of these guys. They can't compare. Not one of them can compare to the legendary Odysseus. And so she has been putting them off through her cunning and through her commitment to virtue, and she stayed faithful to her husband. So she is also a model of wisdom for us in the domestic sphere. And in the absence of Odysseus, she's acting in a way, using her wits to keep the suitors at bay. Not an easy thing. It's a battle, actually, because they could just take her by force. She can't withstand it, but they don't want that. They want her They want the pretense of a legal succession. Right? So that's what's going on here. So we meet the figure of Athena. I'm going to skip over her, but I wanted to mention her. We'll come to her later. But she is not an insignificant figure. She's a very, very important character. And it's part of the just man's life that he also has a dutiful and virtuous wife, as well as offspring. It's part of the whole package. So it's not just about Odysseus. I mean, it is about Odysseus, but Odysseus comes with the wife and the son. And for him to be seen as a just man, he has to have all of these things intact. And Scripture commends the same thing. You're to be the husband of but one wife. And if you want to be an elder, you have to govern your children. And they have to be virtuous as well. And we'll see what sort of a man you are by how you treat your children. If you're suitable, then maybe you can govern a church. But first, let's see how you are in the domestic sphere. It's the same sort of standard and understanding. Right? You can talk in public, but how do we see what goes on behind the scenes? We're going to see that because your kids are going to display it. Not uncomplicated, the topic. But anyway, let me move on to book 5. And we will find Odysseus for the first time. Now, where am I going to find this? Yes, I see a hand up there, please.
I have a question that I forgot to ask, but like, this was back in book 4. I just wrote it down.
Okay, yep.
It was, how does the hospitality of, I can never pronounce his name,
Telemachos.
Yeah. Receives in book 4, in contrast with the situations at home in
Ithaca.
Yeah.
That place. So in book 4, he's not at home, is he? The hospitality he receives. And in book 4, he's receiving it from Nestor, is he not? He receives good hospitality. He was received as a wanderer who requires refuge and needs to be treated well. Remember, the gods can be in disguise, and you may be entertaining a god without knowing it, so you better treat every person as if they were a god. So you're going to treat them with extraordinary respect and hospitality, because one day you may be in the same condition. That's the condition of the ancient world. You treat guests with hospitality because they're at your mercy. There's no relatives around. There's no police. There's no supervision per se. You are really at their mercy. You're really in a point of extraordinary weakness when you go into somebody else's territory. And yet the understanding is, and this is a universal understanding among the Greeks, and it seems in the ancient world, if somebody comes into your house, you treat them as a guest with all respect and honor. Very basic core human value. The rationale for it can vary from culture to culture, but in general, I think it's a common culture. You don't eat your guests. Polyphemus, son of one of the Cyclops, son of Poseidon, eats his guests. That's why Odysseus loses it and blinds him. That's why. He's done something so abhorrent that it contradicts the moral law that governs all things, even the gods. He says this, the gods will not leave this unpunished, what you've done here. And he says, what do I care about the gods? So again, the matter of justice is always at stake in the Odyssey. It's not just stories. It's the fundamental justice. Do the gods care about justice and injustice? That's what the Odyssey is telling us that they do. Yes?
Just on the topic of hospitality, while I was reading that section, I was wondering why, if Polyphemus, one of the Cyclops, would eat his guest, why is it that the rest of the Cyclops are like considered blessed because they have their own crops that grow and stuff? Would the other Cyclops be more hospitable and Polyphemus was like the exception, or is that with all?
We don't know. Let me come to it when we come to it's chapter 9, I think, and Polyphemus and the episode with the Cyclops. I am going to get to it today, so he says. At this stage, who knows? But that's my intention. But I think he's characteristic of the Cyclops. Note the Cyclops see with one eye. And with one eye, you don't have depth perception, and the depth perception here is not physical. They don't recognize the moral order. So that's the second eye. The second eye doesn't acknowledge the moral order. That's my suggestion here. And note that they live solitary lives, they don't live communal lives. And for a Greek, to be an individual outside of community is to have a non-human existence. We tend to think living in exile is a great thing. I live on a desert island. As long as I got enough food and, it's a happy existence, isn't that great? I'm away from other people. That's not how the Greeks saw it. They see a solitary human existence as a deprivation of something essential to human nature. And that would be a Christian view as well, by the way. It's not good for man to be alone. There's a communal aspect to human nature, which is part of human nature, that we bear the image of God, and God is triune in his being. 3 persons. Other people are part of what makes us human. If you put someone in solitary confinement, it's a form of torture, recognized under the Geneva Convention. If you're psychologically distressed, I've noticed over the years, people tend to self-isolate. They move away from other people, they cut themselves off, they feel alienated, and they express that by alienating themselves further. It's a funny old thing. So they end up suffering for what they're doing themselves, which is isolating themselves. It's a symptom of psychological distress. But in the case of the Cyclops, that's the way they choose to live. But again, that's because they have one eye and they don't recognize a moral order at all. So I think that's what the second eye would be. They don't have an eye to heaven and the gods. They don't care about it. They're sort of functional atheists. So I did answer the question. Okay. So let me go to book 5. But we have repeated reference to the story. Oh, now I can put this on because I don't have to worry about that anymore. And with the ghost of Achilles even. How far is this? I think this is way down. I don't think I'm anywhere near. This is in the underworld, surely. It's book 11, isn't it? I'll see in a second. It is indeed. Okay, so that was not good. In the underworld, he'll meet all sorts of people, including Agamemnon and Odysseus. Or Achilles, rather. Sorry, I just don't... I want to put it on the screen here. 4. But I think this is it. Or have I not gone far enough again? This is going to drive me crazy. Oh, no. There we go, book 5. So book 5 is a different venue. Thus far, we've seen Telemachos and his wanderings. He's a sort of a mirror image of Odysseus, in miniature in some ways. They won't have to endure the trials of Odysseus. But he's moving away, he's leaving home, and he's going to come back. When he comes back, he's a different man than when he left, by the way. He stands up to the suitors. And the suitors are shocked at what he does when he comes back in book 4. He's a very different figure. Having met Odysseus' companions at war, he returns with a bit of authority about him. He's got an aura. And I know that aura is a different thing now, but he's got something about him. Yeah, I have a daughter, a teenage daughter. Aura means, but he has something about him which suggests this is not the man he was when he left. And they don't know how this has happened. And they're threatened by him, and now they want to kill him because he's a threat to them. And they're worried that this path of maturity, which he's obviously undertaken, is going to continue. And he won't just sit there passively and suffer their indignities much longer. So they conspire, we're going to kill him. And then we leave that stage. So he has developed as a character, and you'll see that the characters in the Odyssey have richness about them. They develop. They're not static. They're very realistic in that sense. And we see moral development and personal development, psychological development. But Odysseus we have not yet seen. It's the Odyssey. We haven't even met him yet. Book 5 acquaints us with Odysseus, and he is in this place with the nymph. And he is hidden from the whole world. And the nymph's name is Calypso. Now, Calypso, I said to you, I think already, but I'll repeat it, suggests hiding. Because the verb calypso in Greek, I hide, is used in many English phrases, among others, apocalyptic. It was hidden, and now it's been taken out. What was hidden is now revealed. And we talk about apocalyptic literature, and we also associate with apocalypse judgment. And that's interesting here as well, that in some sense it begins with the judgment of the gods has been hidden because Odysseus has been hidden, but now we find out where Odysseus has been located all this time, and now the judgment of the gods is about to begin, and you're going to see it, and the judgment will be pretty catastrophic for the suitors. They're going to judge the immoral and the ungodly, and they're going to justify the godly, righteous man Odysseus. So the beginning of an apocalyptic is at hand. But right now he's on the island of Calypso, and nobody knows where he is. And when we meet him there, and this is an interesting thing, and I said it's about wisdom and virtue, Odysseus is with a goddess so beautiful that his wife would pale in comparison. Her beauty does not fade with age. And she eats ambrosia, which is the food of the gods. It's the food of the undying. That's what ambrosia literally means. And she drinks nectar, and they feed on this all the time. So he feels really good. Physically speaking, he's doing extraordinarily well. But when we meet him, we're going to find that he is suffering and weeping on the beach. He longs to be back home with his wife. And we'll have to ask the question why that is. Because his wife is going to die eventually. And his every bodily pleasure is not going to be satisfied by his wife in the same way it is by the nymph. His Calypso represents the physical, carnal, inferior aspects of Odysseus' being, his passions. And he is going to show us how he regards his passions by wanting to leave Calypso and wanting to go back home. He regards something greater than that. Honor, virtue, wisdom. And in this, he's teaching us mortal beings about the significance of what it means to live a good human life, and that is to prize certain things above eating and drinking. Whereas the suitors represented exactly that. That's all they thought about. It's a study in contrast, just like Psalm 1 was. It's a study in contrast. And so we come to book 5, and again the gods are orchestrating the plot here, and Athena spoke to Zeus and the others of the many cares of Odysseus, remembering, though he was in the nymph's house, she still thought of him. And what does she say? Father Zeus and all other blessed gods everlasting, no longer now let one who is a sceptered king be eager to be gentle and kind, be one whose thought is schooled in justice, but let him always rather be harsh and act severely. Seeing the way no one of the people he was lord over remembers God like Odysseus. This is the state of the injustice. And he was kind, like a father, but now he lies away on an island suffering strong pains in the palace of the nymph Calypso. And she detains him by constraint. He wants to leave, she won't let him go. And he cannot make his way to his country, for he has not any ships by him, nor any companions who can convey him back across the sea's wide ridges. And now there are those who are determined to murder his own dear son on his way home. He went in quest of news of his father to Pylos, the sacrosanct, and to glorious Lacedaemon. Then in turn Zeus, who gathers the clouds, made answer, My child, what sort of word has escaped your teeth's barrier? For is not this your own intention, as you have counseled it? How Odysseus shall make his way back and punish those others, then bring Telemachos home skillfully, since you can do this, so that all without harm he can come back to his own country, while the suitors in their ship come back with nothing accomplished. He spoke. So you do it, because you act as if you don't know what's going to happen. You're already making it happen. Don't rebuke me for it. I have agreed to let you do this, and you are doing it. We're in agreement. The gods are on the side of justice here. You don't need to rebuke Zeus. Zeus is in agreement with what you're going to bring about. And then he sends Hermes down, and he sends Hermes, the messenger of the gods, to the nymph to tell the nymph to let him go. Announce to the nymph with the lovely hair, our absolute purpose. The homecoming of enduring Odysseus, that he shall come back by the convoy, neither of the gods nor of mortal people, but he shall sail on a jointed raft and suffering hardships. On the 20th day make his landfall on fertile Scheria at the country of the Phaiakians. So he's predicting the timeline when this is going to happen as well, everything about this. So it's finally time for Odysseus to come home, and we're going to command it that it happen. So the gods are orchestrating it, the plot. So if we don't think that the gods care about justice, they're not only caring about it, they're going to execute it. They're involved in the behind the scenes. They're not pulling people's strings like puppets, but it's in that direction. Carefully orchestrated. And they will come back. And so send her, tell her to let him go. And Argeiphontes, the slayer of Argos, Hermes, goes. And he finds her, and what's she doing? The nymph singing in the cave with a sweet voice as she went up and down the loom and wove with a golden shuttle. Just like Penelope. The goddesses do the same sorts of things. And he stands in front of her and admires the scene, and then goes into the shining goddess Calypso. And she does not fail to recognize him. She's not a human being. Gods can't deceive each other this way. She recognizes him immediately. For the immortal gods are not such as to go unrecognized by one another, not even if one lives in a far home. But Hermes did not find great-hearted Odysseus indoors, but he was sitting on the beach crying, as before now he had done, breaking his heart in tears, lamentation, and sorrow. As weeping tears he looked out over the barren water. But Calypso, shining among goddesses, questioned Hermes when she had seated him on a chair that shone and glittered. How is it, Hermes of the golden staff, you have come to me? I honor you and love you, but you have not come much before this. Speak that is in your mind. My heart is urgent to do it, if I can, and if it is a thing that can be accomplished. But come with me so I can put entertainment before you. She gives him a little ambrosia and the nectar and so forth. That's what the gods eat. And he eats and drinks, and then he tells her why he's there, and he's basically, let Odysseus go. And she is not happy. She is not happy. And she complains, you Olympian gods do this all the time. You have your own pets. You sleep with nymphs. But when I do it, I have my own pet. I have my own man, and I'm very happy with him, and you tell me to let him go. This is unjust, and it's sort of funny. Not for her, but funny. And he basically just says Zeus commanded it, and he's got the aegis of authority, the Aegis. Nobody knows what this is exactly, but it's a sign of his authority, and the gods, when he holds it up, they say, okay, that's the end of it. I better do what I'm told. So she does what she's told. But even when she does what she's told, she tries to trick him. She says, okay, yeah, I'll do it. But then when she goes to Odysseus, says, you can go. And she's like, yeah, I don't think I can go. You say I can go, but I know what you're going to do. You're going to let me go, and then you're going to wreck my ship, and I'll be back here again. She says, no, I'll let you go. So what he is required to do, and he's commanded here, is he has to trick her, and he has to sleep with her, and so forth. And most people find this morally objectionable for obvious reasons. Penelope's faithful, and there you go, Odysseus. And sure, he doesn't want to sleep with the nymph, and whatever. I can't make any comments on that. I just talk about the story where it speaks of him being extraordinarily unhappy with this, and he wants away. It's not normative in that sense, but it does speak to Odysseus' desire to be with his wife and away from the nymph, even though the nymph is basically satisfying in every carnal sense. There's nothing, and in terms of food, everything. He will, and by eating the food of the gods, he will not die. he will be an immortal, which is the aim of the Greek life, is to be immortal. So he will be given everything that will make him like a god, except one: he will not have virtue. And he rejects an immortal life that is not moral. And so he's the model for the Greeks. I don't want an immortal life if I will not be also a good man. That's why he's exemplary for the Greeks, and why the Greeks, who were renowned for wisdom throughout the ages, the Romans look up to them. To this day, the realm of philosophy comes from the Greek. It's the love of wisdom. It's a Greek word. Use this book to guide their discussions, and their whole culture is framed by Homer. It's why it's such an important book. So anyway, I'm going to skip over this a little bit. And Odysseus, as I say, Calypso tells Odysseus that he can go, but he knows there's a catch. And so he has to be careful and artful, and he doesn't want to offend her, and he all sorts of clever and careful conversations going on there. But he eventually gets away. He gets in the rack. Poseidon sees him getting away and loses his mind and wrecks the ship, but he gets where he is intended to go. But he's literally clinging to like a coconut. Not much, at any rate. It's not really a coconut, but he is barely hanging on. And as we conclude this book, he lands, and he has to get over there's a reef there and rocks which will flay him alive and smash him to pieces, and he has to get over that. But he lands up on the beach of the land of the Phaiakians, naked. All the clothes have been ripped off his back, and he falls asleep on the beach, and he throws leaves over top of him, because at night it gets extraordinarily cold and he would die of hypothermia. He covers himself up. But now he's in the land of the Phaiakians. He's not in the land of Calypso. So the leaves that are covering him are very different than the place where nobody can see where he is. But he falls asleep in that place. In the division of his heart, he's like, where am I going to go? What will happen now, and what in the long outcome will befall me? For if I wait out the uncomfortable night by the river, I fear that the female dew and the evil frost together will be too much for my damaged strength. I'm so exhausted. And in the morning a chilly wind will blow from the river. But if I go up the slope and into the shadowy forest and lie down to sleep among the dense bushes, even if the chill and the weariness let me, and a sweet sleep comes over me, I fear I may become spoil and prey to the wild animals. So what do? This is a life and death decision. They have these on YouTube now. Like, you have a choice. You're going to go up there, or you're going to go down there. I can't remember what the program is. What's that program? You seen this? We have to choose your own story. You're going to go up here and you go down there, and if you go up here, then you suffer terrible death. So he chooses, I'm going to stick by the water. Rather than the wild animals, I'll stick here. And he covers himself up with leaves that keeps him alive. And with his own hands heaped him a bed to sleep on, making it wide, since there was a great store of fallen leaves there, enough for 2 men to take cover, or even 3 men in the winter season. And long-suffering great Odysseus was happy, lay down in the middle, and made a pile of leaves over him, as when, and here we have an epic simile, as when a man buries a burning log in a black ash heap in a remote place in the country where none live near as neighbors, and saves the seed of fire. Because this is what will happen if you have a fire and you cover it with ashes, it won't burn as quickly. You've known this from campfires, right? If it is exposed to the air, the oxygen makes it flame up and it will burn quickly. But if you cover it, it just gets just enough oxygen to stay alive. But it also will endure longer. And so that's the analogy. His life is hanging on just like the tiniest ember. That's how close he is to death. Saves the sea of fire, having no other place to get a light from. So Odysseus buried himself in leaves, and Athena shed a sleep on his eyes, so as most quickly to quit him by veiling his eyes from the exhaustion of his hard labors. So Book 6, long-suffering great Odysseus slept in that place in an exhaustion of sleep and weariness, and now Athena went her way to the district and city of the Phaiakian men. So we've moved into the land of the Phaiakians, and the land of the Phaiakians will govern the whole scene of the stories at least the story within the story, from book 6 all the way to book 13, I think. And within the land of the Phaiakians, he's going to tell the stories of his wanderings. So that will be the story he tells within the context of the land, a civilized land. And part of the storytelling is acquainting us with the greatness of Achilles. And so it tells us something about the significance and purpose of storytelling, which is to bring about civilization. It's not just entertainment. It's acquainting us with a life of wisdom and virtue. That's what he's going to tell in his stories. So it's a story not just about stories, but a particular kind of story, which is worth retelling. Most stories are not worth telling. They're not worth your time. There's no morality being taught, and there's no wisdom in them. Don't watch those stories. Don't read those stories. Ignore those stories. They deserve the infamy of oblivion, as in forgetfulness. They never ought to have been written. They don't deserve to be read. Read the stories of wisdom and virtue. You only have so long in your life. Read the good ones. So this is what happens here. And he is in the land of the Phaiakians. The Phaiakians are half gods. And they occupy a really strange place. It's sort of a fairy land. I'm speaking euphemistically here. It's not clear where they are. And eventually, because Odysseus, they help Odysseus get back home, we're going to find that Poseidon gets so angry that he insists that something happens so this never happens again. And the gods agree to it. So the land of the Phaiakians disappears. Nobody can go there, and they will never be able to help anyone again because of what happened with Odysseus. And that's diplomacy on Zeus's part. Okay, yes, it's terrible. And just to show you we mean what we say, we will not allow the Phaiakians ever to do this again. But here they do. They help Odysseus get back home. And the reason they let him get back home is because they recognize who he is. Because they are gods, and they revere a man as wise and virtuous as Odysseus. And they find out who he is when he hears the story of the Battle of Troy and the people that left Troy. In other words, he hears his own story. Can you imagine what that would be like? You're in a room, unrecognized. You go into a room, you hear a story of a legendary figure and of legendary figures, and you're one of those figures, and the people don't recognize who you are, and those figures are so near and dear to you that it makes your heart weep. Because for you, it's not a legend, this is your life. And yet your life is unrecognized. You're just a story. You're not real to people. And yet you can see that they're moved by it and they revere you so much. And so it's so poignant. And that's his situation. And when he hears the story about himself and about Achilles and about Agamemnon, and he weeps. And when he weeps, he reveals himself. They know who he is. He holds up a veil to try and prevent them from seeing his face weeping, because this is not an ordinary response to a story. And the gods are discerning enough, or rather the king of the Phaiakians, Alcinous, is discerning enough to know, you're not just any man. Are you Odysseus? And he doesn't reveal it right away. There's another episode in this that reveals there's a like an Olympian Games type thing. And what we see even among the godlike figures in this land, there's a little disrespect here, little lack of hospitality. They speak contemptuously of him. Yeah, you look like you were strong at one point, old guy, but you're looking a little bit long in the tooth. I'm not sure you're really up to a real fight with real men, right? And he's like, the old dog is sitting there, okay. They have no idea who this is. He looks strong. He looks like he once was fast, whatever, but not sure he's really got it anymore, and clearly he doesn't. But then there's an apocalypse. The goddess Athena allows him to display who he is by throwing, what is it? It's not a javelin, it's a discus, further than anyone's like, whoa, like a discus throw, a legendary discus throw. And they're like, that no man does that throw. So there's still, and that tells us that although it's been a long time since he was in the wars, he still has sufficient strength to triumph over any man. And it gives us hope for what's going to happen when he gets home with the suitors. This is going to be a contest between men and boys. This is not going to be a battle of equals. All the same. So, but we get Nausikaa and the famous passage here where the king's daughter, and there's a little intrigue here, by the way. She goes down to wash her clothes. And Daddy, can I have the keys to the car to go down to wash the clothes, because she's of marriageable age, and she doesn't have a car, but she's got the chariot, and she wants the permission to go down, wash the clothes, and her father says, yeah, sure, go take the chariot down. And he knows what's going on. He's hoping that she'll meet somebody along the way and whatever. And they go down, and they're washing the clothes, and lo and behold, who is down there? But Odysseus. And as we recall, Odysseus is lying under a pile of leaves, and he has no clothes on. So what is going to happen? Young woman looking to get married, handsome elderly man, not particularly elderly because he still has his full strength, but mature man in front of her. What is going to happen? What's Odysseus going to do? How is she going to act? Remember, she has to show hospitality to a guest. But this guest has no clothes. For his part, as a guest without clothes, how does he treat a young woman who is clearly of some sort of noble lineage? You can't just ignore her, hide, pretend he's not there. He needs to get away from there. He needs her help. So what happens in that scene? It's a comic scene. And it describes what goes through his mind. So they throw a ball, they're playing a game, they throw a ball, it lands in the water, and they all cried out aloud, and noble Odysseus wakened and sat up and began pondering in his heart and spirit, ah me, what are the people whose land I've come to this time? And are they violent and savage and without justice, or hospitable to strangers with a godly mind? See now, how an outcry of young women echoes about me, of nymphs, who keep the sudden, I've had enough of nymphs, of sudden and sheer high mountain places and springs, the rivers and grasses, meadows. Or am I truly in the neighborhood of human people I can converse with? But come now, I myself shall see what I can discover. So he comes out, and what does he do? He breaks off a branch, and he's like walking around, covering his... That's a good thing. Got the big leafy branch. Hope it's got a lot of leaves. And it does. But then when he breaks out, we're given another epic simile, and it builds the suspense, the epic simile. How is he described? Like some hill-kept lion who advances, though he is reined on and blown by the wind, and both eyes kindle. He goes out after cattle or sheep, or it may be deer in the wilderness, like he's a predator. And his belly is urgent upon him to get inside of a close steading and go for the sheep flocks. So Odysseus was ready to face young girls with well-ordered hair, naked though he was, for the need was on him. What need? Watch out, girls. What need was on him? I mean, he's a predator. He's like a lion. And they're the prey. I mean, what is going to happen? I mean, at this point, you don't know, although you're hoping. This better be, he's a hero. This better not be a bad story. And he comes out, and they run. But as you would. All but one, the daughter of the king, stands her ground. Stood fast, for Athena put courage into her heart. Athena did it. The figure of wisdom gives her a virtuous heart, a bravery to stand in this situation. And now took the fear from her body, and she stood her ground and faced him. And now Odysseus debated whether to supplicate the well-favored girl by clasping her knees. Now you can imagine, here's a man naked, and what you do when you're the Greeks and you want favor from a host, you fall to your knees and you grasp their knees. Now, it's not going to be a very good idea. It would show that he knows hospitality. And he wants to show that he's a civilized man. Let me be hospitable. But, given the context, maybe that's not the best idea. or stand where he was and in words of blandishment ask if she should show him the city and lend him clothing. Then in the division of his heart, this way seemed best to him, to stand well off and supplicate in words of blandishment, for fear that if he clasped her knees, the girl might be angry. Well, because she would imagine something different was going on here. Okay, so then he does, and he speaks, I am at your knees, O queen. So telling her, very clever. I'm supposed to be at your knees, and I'm not. Suggesting he has moral awareness, situational awareness, but also knows how he ought to be acting. And she knows it as well. Okay, here's a civilized man. If indeed you are one of the gods who hold wide heaven, then I must find you in the near likeness to Artemis. Artemis. Why Artemis? Oh, she's a virgin. Goddess of the hunt. Virtuous. The daughter of great Zeus, for beauty, figure, and stature. But if you are one of among those mortals who live in this country, 3 times blessed are your father and the lady your mother, and 3 times blessed your brothers too. And I know their spirits are warmed forever with the happiness at the thought of you, seeing such a slip of beauty taking her place in the chorus of dancers. But blessed at the heart, even beyond these others, is that one who, after loading you down with gifts, leads you as his bride back home. I've never with these eyes seen anything like you, neither man nor woman. Wonder takes me as I look on you. And then he's going to compare her to a tree. Yet in Delos, where Apollo, once I saw such a thing by Apollo's altar, I saw the stalk of a young palm shooting up. And she's saying, I liked this, and then the tree comparison. What? A tree. What we see here is the same thing we see in Song of Songs, where women are compared, their beauty are compared to non-personal objects. And it's not like for like. It's something that is so resplendent, it's the whole scene and what it evokes in the person. He's not saying you look like a palm tree. Your hair is a little wild and you're like stick-like with a big thing on the head. It's not a physical comparison. It's a scene that is associated with the gods and associated with such good things. So it's a different way. Poetry works different in scripture, and at least love poetry does, and also in the Greco-Roman age. It can be different. Whereas we associate all with your eyes are like stars. Your hair is like flax, whatever. The courtly love tradition of the medieval period, that governs our understanding of beauty. So it's actually resemblance. You resemble these things. That's not how their poetry works in this way. It's more the whole context. Anyway, but he says, he acquaints her with his difficulty and says how he got there and asks for pity. And he says, you are the first I've come to after suffering, and there is no one else that I know of here among the people who hold this land and this city. And she decides that she is going to receive him kindly and shows him hospitality. And she's exemplary in this. So what the epic is doing here is acquainting us with an example of how a young man should treat an elderly man and vice versa. It's exemplary. 2 virtuous characters. He goes back, and as I say, there's the story, and Athena makes Odysseus look way better than he did before. And Nausikaa is impressed. So then what crosses my mind is, whoa, is she going to want daddy to marry her off to Odysseus at this point? Because he's already made these blandishments, and no, that's not his purpose. And then he listens and he gets fed, shown hospitality, and then he hears the stories. And the stories that he hears are the ones that we hear repeatedly, accounts that take place of the Iliad and of what happened to the heroes from the Iliad as they returned home. And chiefly what happened to Agamemnon. And they always end with basically a blank canvas of what happened to Odysseus. We don't know. We want to know, we don't know. And Odysseus is in their presence. And he weeps when he hears these stories. Now, there's something about the way in which stories move the passions and heal. So people do narrative therapy these days. And I do think there's something to narrative therapy, particularly if it is conjoined with wisdom and virtue. If it's not, it's just a story, and I don't think it has any such healing effect. But if it acquaints you with fundamental justice, the story, I do think you recognize yourself in stories, and it gives you a reassurance that life is orderly and virtuous, despite the anarchy and discord, which we even see in stories like the Odyssey, which starts with injustice and ends up with justice. That's very healing. The Bible does the same thing. So he goes down, and they return to the city, and she decides to go on ahead, because if she shows up with Odysseus in the cart, people are going to presume, and wearing clothes that aren't his own, people are going to assume something untoward has happened, and so she goes first, and then he comes after. All of this is wise. But he hears the story of himself and his companions, reveals who he is through his tears, and is enjoined by the king to tell his story. And then he tells his story. And the story is of his wanderings. And those take place over the course of several books, which are really are the Odyssey. The Odyssey is the story at the center of the books. Books, 9 to 12 thereabouts. These are the story. This is his real Odyssey, and it tells us from the time that he left Troy, how did he end up on the land of Nausikaa, where we met him in book 5. It's that interim period. So from year 10 to year 20, he went through a series of trials. He was in the land of the Laestrygonians. They are cannibals. He was in the land of Polyphemus. He was in the land of Helios, the sun god, ultimately. We'll get to that. I'm going to see if I get to Polyphemus. I know I'm not going to now. It's so annoying. But in the island of Helios, the sun god, they're told, even though they're really starving, do not, whatever you do, don't eat the cows of Helios, the sun god, or you're not going to go home. And so what do the men do? They eat the cows because they're starving. All but Odysseus. Odysseus is able to, even though he's starving, to suppress his hunger because he knows that it's wrong. And again, this is exemplary, but his companions fail. So what's the moral of the story? At least within that tale. It's that most men will not live a virtuous life. Their passions will compel them, and they will be overruled by their passions. And that will destroy them. Do not give way to your passions. Govern your passions by an act of will, doing what is good and right at all times. Always do the right thing. Now, what time have I got here? I have 3 minutes. Well, okay, so book 9. Can I get to book 9 in that time? I'm not sure if I can. And even when I do, I'm not going to get Demodocus and that story. Book 9. And Calypso, the Ciconians, the Lotus Eaters. There's a whole series of the Lotus Eaters. You eat the food and it makes you forget who you are. Oblivion. Is there a temptation for men who are suffering to take drugs and forget who they are? Was it a temptation that was experienced in the past and is experienced today? Absolutely. The suffering companions of Odysseus give in to that urge to forget who they are because it hurts so much. They want to put it aside. And when they do, they lose their identity. Same thing will happen when they meet Circe. She's a witch. She gives them a bowl to drink. When they drink of it, she turns them into swine. Again, they're not able to resist the temptations that are in front of them. And they're real temptations, by the way. The temptation to deal with your pain and suffering by escapism is real. How many give way to it? Almost everybody. Because life in reality is very tough. But what's more tough than reality is not recognizing that the ultimate reality is in conformity with truth and virtue and wisdom. And if you don't live that life, you are not going to be happy. That's the one thing you most want to avoid. You can't avoid suffering. It's impossible to live a wise and virtuous life. That's also the story of the Odyssey. But you can ultimately, and it may be a long time, you can ultimately be blessed by living always in conformity with what is unchangeable. That is goodness, justice, beauty, truth. Those things which Odysseus is dedicated to will lead him home and leads all of us home. I'm going to stop there today but I'll pick up next time in book 9 with Polyphemus in that episode, and then I'm going to want to read the passage where Odysseus goes down to the underworld, because this is also extremely important. That's in book 11, and then I'm going to jump forward to book 14 and so forth. So please read on, and I'll get there next time.